This is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com, talking with you today about Mandela effect, reality shifts, timelines, the afterlife, the simulation, and the dreamtime. So this all got started when I got word from a friend, Ross, who wrote to me, and he asked me a whole bunch of questions. He was asking, what is the relationship between timelines, reality shifts, and the afterlife? If we exist in a simulation when living, where do we go when we die? What, if anything, exists outside of the simulation? When we go within, are we accessing a part of us outside of the simulation? So these are some of the questions he was asking, but he goes on, knowing Ross, there's always more once he gets rolling. He added, since physical reality is an illusion, does everything that I experience exist only in my mind or consciousness? Or is it being dreamed by my soul or some other part of me? Or is it all just a part of the simulation or some combination? Where is the simulation coming from? Is it being beamed from Saturn's rings, as David Icke suggests? Who created the simulation? Inquiring minds want to know. So right there, that's a lot to grasp and to kind of wrap our minds around. But in addition, pretty much the same day I got that message, I also heard from another friend, Gina. And Gina had questions which are rather similar because she had started hearing from loved ones who'd passed away ever since the day her mother died. And she was out of the country at the time and in need of finding some housing. And her ancestors came through big time, wanted to reassure her. The women folk were very reassuring. The men folk in Italy, this was Italy, they were very just really reassuring, like, we've got this, and what do you need? How are you feeling? Gina said, well, we've got lodging and a place to stay through like tomorrow, but our family needs a new place to stay. And Gina was feeling so much grief from her mother passing away in a different country that it was hard for her to have managed to make much progress in that front. But what was amazing is that the person she was talking to, he said, you need a house. And he said that in Italian. And the next thing she knew, he'd gathered a whole group of family discussing what could be done amongst themselves. And the men were making arrangements while the women provided grief support for Gina. And after this amazing meditative experience where she's witnessing this communication with deceased ancestors, the next day, Gina's cousin said, good news, a friend of mine has a place you can stay, big enough for you and available immediately. Well, that was amazing. Then Gina had a question for me. How is it, Cynthia, that I've never heard of anyone else experiencing this in such a real-time way? And are they all ghosts hanging out in their old houses? Or is it like they're in another plane that looks how it was when they lived? How can they see me and know what I'm thinking? What about people who go straight to heaven? I don't understand how this is possible, yet it's becoming more and more a part of my daily life. And what they tell me proves itself to be true. Can you help me grasp where they are and how they can see and hear me? Did Mom have something to do with this sudden ancestral connection? It literally began the day that she died. So this is Gina's writing to me, and she's writing to me because she already knows I experience these things. I have all my life. And recently, just last year, March 17th, there was a remarkable experience. That was a day I was getting ready to do a live stream with a guest on our International Mandela Effect Conference live stream on YouTube. And we were getting ready for that. I was getting ready for it, preparing the slides. But I can feel the very firm, insistent presence of a very charismatic woman. And she seemed timeless. Usually when I'm connecting with a deceased ancestral person or something like that, they pretty much always look like they're in their 20s or 30s. They seem, in that sense, timeless. She was no exception to that. And she just told me who she was and what she wanted, because I was asking, who are you? What do you want? I don't have much time. This better be important. She said, it is. I can show you a picture of me. I'm your friend's grandmother, who passed away before your friend's mother ever got to know me. She was just a little baby. And because the last name was so familiar, was so common. The last name is Hall, Hall. And because this grandmother came from Seattle in the 1920s, there were just hundreds of Halls, and even many people, maybe a dozen, with her exact name. And I'd already looked to find her high school yearbook without success, looking where her family was living at the time, which apparently was not where she went to school. True. She told me, no problem, I'll show you. I'll take you straight to it. And I thought, okay, if she can take me straight to it, let's go. And she did. And it was amazing because not only did she take me straight to her high school yearbook, the correct one, with her common name and everything, but she was the president of the Honor Society. She was one of the stars of the senior class play. She had her baby photo because she was a senior. They did that for the seniors. There was a baby photo, not for all the seniors, some of the seniors. So we ended up getting photos from a family whose house had burned down, who my friend's mother had never known her mother. There weren't that many photos, and now, boom, we've got all of this. And so I do know what that's like to communicate with these deceased loved ones who I've never met, my friend never met her, and her mother never really knew her. So this shows you what's possible, and thus my interest in the topic. Definitely I'm interested. So from the perspective of that question Ross was asking, how does this all fit together with timelines, reality shifts, the afterlife? Well, we might ask ourselves, what is the common thread? The thread that I see is consciousness. And that's a big, big realm, consciousness. It's huge. Within that realm, I like to look at the concept of conscious agents. And the reason I do that, it goes to my early life experiences here on this planet, in this lifetime, where my first reaction was something along the lines of, whoops, wrong planet. Why? Because I felt like most people did not have the sense I do of conscious agency, of recognizing what I'm going to talk about next. Conscious agency, what is that? Where do we go when we die? What's going on with this? The timelines, the reality shifts. Okay, if you look at those phenomenon, for example, reality shifts, timelines. If we're jumping timelines, if we're shifting reality, who is doing the shifting? Is it me and my brain and my body? No, I'd say no, definitely not. It is my consciousness, my conscious agency, that which exists, like you could call it the mind, you could call it, but it's a timeless sense of mind. It's not dying when the brain dies because it existed before I was born. And that feeling I had, whoops, wrong planet, that's a chapter in an excellent book on the topic of Born Aware, by which includes the stories of myself and several others, about a dozen others, talking about feeling and knowing that there was conscious agency before birth. That term may not be used, but that's the term I'm using now. And if you look at the timelines and the way we can jump timelines, we can do that with conscious agency, with the awareness of the being, the divine being that we are. Not some poor thing, as I just heard someone had told that to my daughter when she was sick. They said, "Oh, you poor thing." And we are not poor, and we are not things. It's just the opposite. We are verbs. We are divine beings. We are beingness itself. We are consciousness exploring itself with love, with connection, with relationships. And that's how this works with the afterlife, and how it's possible to make a real-time connection with people alive right now who, when you yourself might be generations back or forward in time. Totally possible. So then where do we go when we die? I'm talking about it. I'm saying for those of us who have this memory, you might feel like this is ringing a bell. I feel it. I remember that. If you don't have the memory, and you don't have that experience, not yet, that's okay. Then just keep an open mind and consider this. It's for your consideration. It might sound fanciful, might sound out there, but a lot of us experience things this way. So this conscious awareness outside of ordinary space and time is this pre-existing state that's before we're born. The other question Ross was asking is, what, if anything, exists outside of the simulation and the dream time? And one of the biggest questions any of us can ask, it's a philosophical question, asked in one of my favorite books, Axiogenesis by Nicholas Rescher. I love it because it's this very philosophical, strong exposition of the idea that everything comes into being because of basic goodness, fundamental goodness. You know, I love to ask, how good can it get? Axiogenesis is really a book exploring process philosophy from a very optimistic standpoint. So it feels like home to me. Feels right. Feels like my experience between lifetimes, when I feel like I can just hang out with that divine presence, that divine cosmic love. And it is exhilarating, rejuvenating, inspirational. It's everything. And I feel like that is what I have to thank for everything in this physical world as well. So for me, it's my faith, my spiritual connection with Source, with Creator, with God. But for many of us, when we ask how does anything exist at all, we look at measurables. We're looking at things that we can look at and measure, but we can't do that necessarily when you're asking where did it come from, and is there something existing outside of this space, this time. And so this is where I like the idea of the dream time. And it's not my idea. The Australian Aborigines talk about the dream time. All of the shamanic traditions on the planet delve into it to some degree. It's very much a part of ancient yogi philosophy, recognizing that everything that's physical is Maya, illusion, and the real reality is something like a dream. And that what we're experiencing when we're awake is the results of someone's great dream. Absolutely. I would agree with that, and 100% actually. It feels like when you're in this physical reality, we've dreamt this up before we got here. This was our dream before we showed up. And now we get to live it and experience it, play with it, learn from it. It may not feel like play, it may not feel fun, but what we are getting is the benefit of every moment of experience. And if you really recognize that you are participating, and there are levels of consciousness within each of us, like your stomach is feeling one way, your heart's feeling another, your head's feeling yet a third way. When you recognize you can align these qualities and levels of self, of these conscious agency levels, and that maybe, just maybe, that you can be integrated at a higher order level that has conscious agency. And it did before you were born, and it will after you die. And you can absolutely connect with anyone, anything else, as you develop your powers of attention and awareness. And this self-reflexivity that we often notice if we're seeing synchronicity, for example. You're playing with that self-referential awareness through meditation, contemplation, and prayer. These same tools are pathways that allow us to tune in to what might be beyond the simulation, beyond what this physical reality is, beyond the dream time, you know. So, next question from Ross. When we go within, are we accessing outside of the simulation or the dream time? Well, from my point of view, when I go within, I can experience something that feels to me like the experience of nothingness. Again, I'm not the only one that's experienced it. Michael Novak wrote a book about it, and I think we sense it if you look into Taoism, if you look into this concept of what is the formlessness beneath the form. And of course, again, ancient yogi traditions and philosophies and all the shamanic traditions. All of these philosophies are going to be touching at aspects of this experience of nothingness, of the void, of that which all comes from, like a great flowering, a great birth. And so these forms, I'm calling it Dreamtime quite a lot, but I think of that as synonymous with people who talk about the simulation, in the sense that what we sense and feel with our physical observational qualities of vision, which are limited from red to violet, auditory range, again, very narrow bandwidth of receptivity for us humans, and all of our senses, sight, smell, sound, touch, taste, all of those are very constrained. They're very tiny in terms of what we're capable of catching based on what we know is really out there, much, much, much more than what we're sensing. Going into this nothingness is thus a contemplative journey. It's an experience of meditation, an experience of practice to go into that place which is no place, and that time which is unchanging. And to be there, to me, feels like love. It feels like being in the heart, the bosom of the Creator, of God. It feels like you're right there. And it's like the next movement that happens will be a kind of blessing and being into birth, a birthing of creation. We can experience it, and I think we do. And that experience of that I'm talking about is very useful. It's not something dangerous. It's something we're going to do at some point anyway. To go into it, I think, as with all meditation, maybe it's not for you. So if you feel like intuitively, it's not my thing, don't do it. Trust your intuition and your own inner guidance. Absolutely. Okay, what is the nature of everything that exists? Okay, like I said, we focus on these material forms. We're focusing on almost to the exclusion of what we're living for, I think. Because when I think, what am I living for? It's not going to be the measurables. It won't be whoever dies with the most toys wins. Wins what? When you can't take it with you when you go. And what have you really won during that process? I think once basic needs are met, there's no need to be greedy at all. It's enough just to have what you need and to be happy with that. So for me, what I'm living for, these are intangibles, unmeasurables. They're things like love, connection, and those magic golden moments that we share with others when we feel our spirits are fully present and fully alive. For me, those are the treasures of my life, not the things, only to the degree that the things might evoke one of those memories where they have special significance that way. Some things, of course, I love, but most of all, I love plants, animals, people, the earth herself, all of these beings that are growing, changing, loving, connecting. And that, to me, is the true treasure. So when I look at what that is and what that means, then that question Ross is asking, what's the nature of everything that exists? To me, it's at the heart of what matters and what means everything, and that's love. So the nature of everything that is, it comes from what I discover in that place of, nothingness, no change, expansive space to include everything, and the infinity of timelessness itself. Okay, so where is the simulation and dream time coming from? Okay, these questions are a little beyond everyday ordinary consciousness, frankly. So again, no way to prove any of this through a scientific hypothesis, through experiments, through experimental results. We're not going to see answers here. So it's metaphysics. But the source of the simulation or the dream time is definitely one of the greatest mysteries that exists. Intrinsically, it is unknowable to get an answer to that. And basically, it feels to me like this simulation, this dream time I'm talking about, is really arising from consciousness. And I, as a conscious agent, when I'm between lives, I never mistake myself for God. That's not where I go. I know some people say it's all one, it's all good. Okay, maybe. But my experience is that I retain conscious agency between lifetimes. Some of us do that, and if you do that, then you can still see you're still connected to all that is. That's true. And there is this integral love and these connections and relationships and so forth. But I think there's a gift in exploring the self-referential qualities of the levels of self that we can enjoy. And so, just if you're noticing between your head, your heart, and your gut, that's great. You're getting a first taste of what are these levels of self feeling right now. How are you feeling? What do you need? And each level has its own voice. How do you bring these voices together into a chorus and make it your own voice? And what does that sound like? And can you be all of a piece? To me, these questions might seem kind of simple and mundane, but this, to me, captures the essence of where is the simulation and the dream time coming from. It's from that consciousness and these levels of consciousness and the way they communicate, converse, and interact with themselves and each other. So you, as a conscious agent, interacting with others, and this gets into what Gina was talking about too. It's like, how are these ancestral spirits of the past, are they staying in their homes? Not really. They lived there in that time, but they are timeless. They are, accessing infinity. They're accessing eternity. And they can access each and every one of us through the attention and the awareness that we can bring to the fullness of our being. And to the degree that we claim our own conscious agency, we can begin to be much more open to connecting with plants like this tree, beautiful cedar tree, and the birds that I can hear right now flying overhead, little hummingbirds that come and look at me. They just like, hello, right now, just a bit ago. All of these beautiful beings are conversing, and oh, it came back. The hummingbird's here. Like, yep, I'm here. It's sitting in a tree I'm looking at. So there's an awareness and an interaction happening, just like there is with you and me, through this video, which is timeless in its own way. And so it's coming from the conscious agency that we all intrinsically are. We are that conscious agency. We are consciousness. We are love, and we are related to one another. We're interacting. We're playing in this physical reality. And this wraps it all up for me in the idea of how good can it get, which for me is another journey. I think of it as I move on my path ever upward toward increasing wisdom, hopefully. Sometimes I feel like a beginner, and that's good. It's good to be a beginner, good to have beginner's mind, good not to assume that you know everything, good to see things that are mind-blowing. And that journey of asking how good can it get, gradually trusting more and more, expanding one's sense of conscious agency in the world to interact with others and levels of oneself. This is how we can find out together just how good it can get. And please keep that question in mind at all times. It's one of my favorites for every situation, because it can call mighty sources of conscious agency that you might not even know that you've had access to. And when you call for it and need it, it will come. And you will start to live the answer to this beautiful question: how good can it get for you, for me, for everyone? Till next time, this is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com.